Today, I'm joined by Violet Homewood Maree CoCo, an Australian-born activist who has recently come back from an international effort supporting greater awareness for aid in Gaza. Violet, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Chay. It's so good to be here.
Before we get into some of the questions, tell me a little bit about your story.
I grew up in Sydney. I went to Macquarie University. I studied philosophy. And I think that was really the start of my journey because while studying philosophy, I learned about morality and I really questioned what it was to be a good person. And then I saw, I guess, the way that we were treating the world and this livable planet and the way that was impacting our communities and the environment. And so, as you said, I started my, I guess, passion and life commitment to trying to make the world a better place. And I started to get into activism where it was really about challenging the inaction of governments to be aligned with the science when it comes to protecting our environment. I started to lock onto bulldozers and I guess, do some environmental protection work in that way. And then when the genocide escalated, like everybody else, I saw these images of all these children suffering so much and and started to get involved in the peace movement. And I learned how the two are intrinsically connected. The US military is the largest polluter in the world. It's like a bigger polluter than 5 countries' emissions combined. It's and I feel like they, learning about how they use the military and these atrocities to capture land, to extract from that land. And like there's gas reserves off the border of Palestine. And so, started to engage in peace activism and anti-war and anti-weapons trade with genocide in mind. And that's where I landed with the flotilla. And that's sort of the trajectory.
Thank you for sharing more on your story and your background. Your leadership on the flotilla has recently brought international attention to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Why did you feel like that was important to take part in?
I remember, being at home and the flotilla first reaching my news feed with Greta Thunberg. And I recognized how powerful it was for her to weaponize her privilege in this way. It's important to note that nothing about the flotilla is illegal. It's not like locking onto a bulldozer where there's trespass and all this sort of stuff. It's actually very legal to deliver aid with international law. And so, and I also felt like I could see the power of the direct action part of it, where it was drawing the attention of the occupation forces, the IOF, from Palestinians, from the violence that they were enacting on these people, and it forced them to follow the flotilla. I'd seen before that they had arrested the flotilla participants, and all of that time that those activists were on the water and being chased by the military, that military was not killing Palestinian children. And so for me, it felt like there was so many different wins. And then I learned about the illegal siege on Palestine and how in 2007, I think it was, they implemented this illegal blockade, illegal blockade on Gaza, where they weren't allowing food in and out. And so the flotilla is sort of, it's about breaking that illegal blockade. It's about breaking that illegal siege on Palestine and trying to deliver aid, which felt really important and powerful. We were seeing at the time like a mass starvation where, they were not letting in enough food to feed all of the Palestinian people, even though there were all those trucks lined up at the border. And so it seemed like it didn't matter how much we donated or how many weapons we managed to stop. They were still able to like stop all this food from getting into hungry children. And so that's when I knew it was really dangerous. But I felt in my heart that it was the right thing to do.
So what was it about this flotilla effort that called for this type of action? And would you describe it as extreme?
I think, knowing how volatile the Israeli army is, it is extreme in that respect that, I went into this knowing that I could be killed. But on the other side, as like a human being watching all of these atrocities be committed, to not take this action, to not do everything in my power to stand in solidarity with Palestine, that felt extreme. It felt extreme not to go. And so, I stand by what I did, and there's going to be more flotillas, and I may end up doing another one relatively soon. So
Share with me a little bit about the journey. Who was with you and what was on the flotilla?
we had a boat. We were like a boat of Australian passport holders and Canadians. There was a Girl Scout teacher, a makeup artist, an ex-French parliamentarian. There was one French woman there, Alima, who she was very courageous because she didn't actually speak much English. And so, to get on and not share a language was really courageous. We had obviously our amazing captain who was this cute Belgian man, and it was just normal people. Just normal people. I remember we were sailing through the Mediterranean at one point and we were being chased by this drone from the IOF. And Daniela, this beautiful Canadian woman, turns to me and she goes, "Violet, I'm a makeup artist. Like, I'm being chased through the Mediterranean by the IOF and I'm a makeup artist." And I'm like, "You're not just a makeup artist, Daniela. At this point, you're a humanitarian, you're a warrior, we are doing our best for humanity here." And I think she went way past makeup artist at that point. But, it just shows to her she's just a normal person. We're all just normal people. And we were carrying, on our boat, lots of food. We were carrying lots of medical supplies because Israel doesn't let medical supplies go in. We had prosthetics because, there's obviously a lot of child amputations, and they're not letting the prosthetics come in. And we were also carrying children's books because at that time there was a sort of was when they first constructed that fence to stop the children from going to school. The fence became, their school was now part of an exclusion zone or military zone or something. And so there's this beautiful image of all these children just at this barbed wire fence reading books because they just wanted to go to school. And so we decided to also pack some school books in hopes that we could share those when we arrived in Gaza.
Looking back now, what would you say was the greatest risk associated with the flotilla mission?
Yeah, it was just sailing past Turkey. So Israel released a statement pretty much saying that they were going to use live rounds on any flotilla boat that kind of left past the Turkey region. And so, there was this point where we all sort of docked and looked at each other and we were like, okay, are we going to do this? And at that point, we'd had Francesca Albanese and Greta Thunberg come out and say, don't sail any further, it's too dangerous. But everybody on the boats, this like enormously huge international movement of people from all around the world all looked at each other and said, this is worth it. This is worth risking our lives for. This is, we can't turn back now because, we couldn't look at ourselves. We can't look at humanity without doing something that's proportionate to the distressful things that are happening. And so, we took off and we kept going, and we were so worried about, them even thinking that there were any weapons on board that we threw the kitchen knives overboard when we thought that we were going to get intercepted. So we couldn't even chop our vegetables for the last bit because we just wanted nothing on board. We were all trained in non-violence. And so obviously we were intercepted and all abducted, and we were moved onto this prison ship. And then as part of the induction on the prison ship, they brought each person through a torture chamber where individually people were assaulted, sexually assaulted, tasered, injected with strange substances that we don't know what they were. And then just ejected into this prison ship that was open air. They wet us. They took off our clothing other than our most bottom layer. So we were subjected to freezing cold temperatures. We were not given any food, water, very, very small amount of water on the first day, and then nothing for the next 4 days that we were with them. And then it was a very horrific time in Israeli custody, and we, took care of each other as best as possible. But what really apparent to me was that, these soldiers were not, they were very used to, and they very much enjoyed inflicting torture and suffering on people. And this, for me, drew very sharp focus to the 10,000 Palestinians who are still in Israeli custody, in those hellholes, and many of whom are children, some as young as 2, in these Israeli prisons where torture is a daily part of life. And even with all of my privilege, even with all of our international passports privileges, they still felt that they had the right to inflict us all with so much pain and suffering. And so that was very shocking. That was a very hard part of it, not just experiencing pain, but experiencing people who enjoy suffering. That is a very hard thing to experience. You want to believe it was the best of humanity and the worst of humanity all on one ship. I can tell you that.
Thank you for sharing, Violet. A lot of what you're sharing is, very confronting, and you have spoken about surviving sexual assault before publicly while you were detained. How has that, if at all, shaped your perspective and your commitment to justice and advocating for human rights?
Well, I think that experiencing an embodied understanding of cruelty definitely has its own repercussions on my psyche. I watched the documentary on the Palestinian prisoners and what they go through. They have the Israeli soldiers, they've documented evidence of the Israeli soldiers using dogs to rape the Palestinians. And I feel very lucky that I did not experience that much trauma. But while we were on the prison ship, you know, the women and men who were assaulted and sexually assaulted got together and we talked to each other. And this one very powerful Irish woman stood up and said, "It's not my shame, it's their shame. It's their shame for what they've done to us." And so, you know, we don't have to carry that shame of the assault because it's not us, it's them. They're the ones that have done the shameful thing. And this helped so much and continues to help. And I think that it's really important because knowing that, you know, Palestinians are facing these sexual assaults, they zip tie their genitals and bash them with the men, you know, it is horrific. And so knowing that these Palestinians, maybe when they come out of prison, they don't have that powerful Irish woman to tell them whose shame it is. And so it's all of our responsibility to make sure that we really name that the perpetrator is the one that carries the shame. That's what I learned.
There's a lot in there that I'd like to personally unpack. But moving on to the allegations of sexual assault that you've shared personally on your account, share a little bit more about what's happening right now. How are these being investigated, and what support have you received, both personally and publicly?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share that. You know, the Global Samud Flotilla and the Freedom Flotilla Coalition were the two organizations that sailed, and they both have been incredibly supportive and very powerful in their workings. So actually, many countries are now in the process of investigating the assaults. Here on this continent, we had the amazing Senator Faruqi up in Parliament just saying to Penny Wong, "Don't you believe women? Don't you believe these women?" And she had no choice but to say, of course, she believes women. And so at that point, she met with a few of the flotilla participants and the AFP, and they have agreed to investigate what happened to us. And yeah, it's been a very traumatic experience to recount, especially to police. I don't have a lot of trust in police, but yeah, it's been a very traumatic experience to recount to them the graphic details of what happened. But yeah, the community support around has been phenomenal, and I think that it's so important that we are able to make these statements because it's very difficult for the Australian government to investigate Israel for the crimes that it's committing against Palestinians, but it can investigate Israel on the crimes that it's committed against its own citizens, against Australian citizens. And so that's a powerful lever that we didn't really expect out of the flotilla, but something that is coming out of it. And yeah, other countries around the world are doing the same as well.
So that investigation is happening right now?
Right now, yeah. So I've done my first day, and I'll do another full day next week talking to the police.
Looking back now, have you found it challenging speaking about these issues, particularly given the sensitivities around Gaza?
Yeah, you know, it was only 4 days that we were in their custody. And I thought I was gonna die several times, and it was horrific, and not only experiencing what they were doing to me, but also seeing them commit those atrocities against my friends, hearing them bashing and torturing people in a room that you can't access. It was a lot. It's been a real lot. And so, sorry, I forgot the question. I got so caught up in that.
That's totally fine. Have you found that speaking about the sexual assault and what happened during the course of the flotilla and being detained during that those moments, have you found that difficult experience to speak about particularly given the sensitivities around Gaza?
Yes, so absolutely. But very much because I want people to know that what we experienced was only 4 days, and, Palestinians are under the occupation of Israeli soldiers 24/7 for years, since 1948, but especially since the escalation of the genocide, and so, um, yeah, I feel that when I speak about these things, I wanna do that justice. I wanna make sure that, we put this story that the flotilla participants experienced in context, in the broader context, in a way that, acknowledges, that it was only 4 days, as horrific as it was.
Shifting the focus back on you and your journey, looking now at this next chapter, what does that bring for you?
Well, there's a few really important things going on. So there's another flotilla, the siege isn't broken, and so, there'll be another boat going, and either myself or my husband will be on that boat, and so, we wanna I'll be supporting that mission. We're also about to have a massive stockpile of US weapons moved into the center of Melbourne City, and basically using the entire city as a body shield, human shield for US military, which could be supplied to Israel as well. So we definitely want to get that out of the city. I've also been participating in a campaign about closing Pine Gap, which is a facility in the center of the country that gathers all of the information from the whole Swaana region and feeds that to US and Israel. So we want to close Pine Gap. I also, I recognize that while we think globally, we've got to act locally as well. And on this continent, there was a genocide that happened as well. And I'm very connected to First Nations people here who are fighting to open up a school for their children so their children can have culture. And so, yeah, I think there's many, many avenues to seek justice, and sometimes I can, flit around from campaign to campaign a bit. But the interconnected web of all of these struggles is a story that all of us need to be telling, and that's colonialism, capitalism, colonization, militarism. I know they're really big words, but they are creating this web of suffering in our world. And one way or another, I'm going to be doing my bit to try and make a better world.
And you are so quite accomplished as well. I could see that your work has spanned, through environmental advocacy, First Nations justice, and more recently, human rights and peace. Lastly, what's one message that you hope Australians understood about the human impact of war and conflict?
I think that's so hard to say one thing I want Australians to understand. I want them to have the courage not look away. I want them to have the courage to continue um, to really feel the atrocities that are happening. Because once you take the time to really understand what's happening, then I don't believe that people would be able to look away and be able to to not take action. And I want people to understand that you don't have to be on a flotilla to be effective. There's so many ways to make the world a better place, just acting locally, to join a local community group, and yeah, uh, yeah, Act with love.
How can we keep connected with you?
I'm on social media. I've got Instagram, Violet_CoCo_Maree. I also have a Patreon. If people want to subscribe to that, I post regularly there what I'm up to.
Thank you. And from everyone here at the Oz Arab Media team, thank you so much for watching.